Welcome back to Classical Homeopathy channel with Bill Gray. Today we're going to talk about a controversial topic called antidotes. There are, in some people's point of view, including mine, there are things that can be done that can actually interfere with the action of the remedy and cause a full setback or a full relapse. We define that as an antidote. This is controversial. Most homeopaths, including the best in the world, who are good friends of mine, and we've had this discussion, do not believe in antidotes. They, I guess, consider that a very good prescription, a very precise prescription, cannot be antidoted by anything. And besides, some of the problems with antidotes would be a compromise in practice. So we've had this discussion and they don't agree with me. I was trained by George Vathokas, who taught me this, and it's absolutely true. I have now practiced for 49 years and I see antidotes literally every week, if not even every day in practice. And it's a very clear phenomenon. I mean, you know, I should be humble enough to say that maybe my prescribing isn't that precise, and that's the reason why my patients can be antidoted. But I would expect after 49 years of practice, I would be enough improved that I would see less antidotes. And that's not my experience in practice. I could write many books of cured cases that have been antidoted along the way, and we had to correct the problem of the antidote, but they were nevertheless cured of their chronic disease. So I'm very convinced of this myself. Others disagree, and I agree that it's a deterrent to coming into my practice, because antidotes I do believe in, and I insist that patients try to avoid those, but that's a personal choice that every homeopath makes. So the antidotes that are very clear based on my clinical experience, number one is coffee. That's anything made from coffee beans, that including in decaf coffee or instant coffee. And it also includes even coffee flavored things. So coffee ice cream, coffee cake, coffee candy, tiramisu, will antidote remedies. I've got many, many examples of people, chronic symptoms that come back within hours after tiramisu or coffee ice cream. The antidote is by both touching coffee and ingesting coffee, but not smelling coffee. So you can go to Starbucks and enjoy Starbucks, but I can give a good personal example. My brother's dog knocked his coffee off on a hardwood floor, and I thoughtlessly took out my handkerchief and wiped it up, and that little bit that got on my fingers antidoted my remedy. And it happened that it was curing my cardiac problem, so I had angina and palpitations and so on that came back within hours. And so I took a dose, and that corrected that, just as a classic example. One thing, it's coffee, but coffee does not necessarily mean caffeine. Caffeine itself does not antidote, so all kinds of even caffeinated teas are perfectly fine. Camphor is another antidote. That would be Vicks, Tiger Balm, Noxema. In communities where they do pujas, the cone incense has camphor in it, so touching or ingesting camphor would antidote. Some Indian sweets have camphor, and in South Indian temples, the holy water has camphor, so even touching or ingesting the holy water does antidote. I've seen many times. But once again, smelling does not. So you can go to a puja, you can go to a temple and smell the burned camphor and not be antidoted. You just don't want to touch it or ingest it. Other similar fragrant things are not a problem. So menthol, mentholatum, eucalyptus, mint are not antidotes. There are homeopaths who believe in antidotes, but they have a very, very long list. And I'm just listening to you, the ones that I've seen in practice that antidote. Um, Mint is not an antidote. Eucalyptus is not an antidote in my experience. Tea tree oil is a little bit of a puzzle. The concentrated tea tree oil that people use sometimes for skin conditions, fungus conditions, the concentrated stuff will antidote, but when it's used as a fragrance in soaps or shampoos or something, um, uh, tea tree oil does not antidote. So only the concentrated tea tree oil is a problem. One thing that other people, even George Vathulkas, have not discovered is that acupuncture antidotes. This is something I discovered by setting up a practice with very wonderful acupuncturists, and right away in the first week or so we discovered we were ruining cases right and left. Homeopathy interferes with acupuncture and acupuncture interferes with homeopathy. So I learned that from difficult experience, difficult for my patients. Very clear antidote is antibiotics. There are many, many cases. Just recently I've seen a recent example of that. Very clear. Antibiotics, when they're actually used for a true infection, will antidote remedies. And that can be instantly, within hours. It can be delayed by a few days, but not by very much. That's when there's an actual infection. I've seen cases where dentists will not work on teeth if somebody has mitral valve prolapse because they're afraid of causing or spreading an infection onto the heart valves. And so they give antibiotics as a prevention. There's no actual infection. And I've seen people use antibiotics in that situation or in wisdom teeth extractions and so on, where it does not antidote. So it depends on whether there's actually a clinical infection or not. It used to be that low-speed drills in dentistry were a universal antidote. Now, at least in the United States, most people use high-speed drills, and those tend to be safe, unless they push too hard and it gets down into the low-frequency realm, which is not that often. So dental work is not usually an antidote now. I do tell people to take a dose after they go to the dentist just in case, just as a precaution. That's of LM potencies, which is what I use these days. One thing in the dental office that does consistently antidote is the Cavitron machine, which is an ultrasonic plaque remover where you touch the teeth and it blasts the plaque off. That will antidote. So it's best to use the manual scraping and polishing method of cleaning teeth. So what if you're a homeopathic patient and you're exposed to an antidote? If it's a C potency prescriber, the best thing to do is just simply to wait, because taking a dose too soon can interfere with C potencies. With LM potencies, that's not an issue, so you can go ahead and take a dose, and hopefully that'll obviate the antidote. If you get an actual relapse after an exposure to one of these antidotes, and it's a full relapse, in the C potency world, that becomes a very delicate matter. The tendency there is to try to see if time will now enable you to get over the antidote. Because if you give a dose too soon in the C potency world, I did this for over 30 years, it can very likely cause a relapse in itself, independent of the antidote. So you want to try to see if the patient can get over the antidote on his own. But if not, then you're forced to give a dose, and that's a delicate decision that should only be made by the doctor, not by the patient. In the LM world, Subsequent doses of LMs do not do any harm. They don't interfere. They can be played with basically by the patient. They don't need input from the homeopath. And my observation is that if there's a full relapse after an antidote, it takes about 7 to 10 daily doses of LM potencies to recover from the antidote, but it does work successfully. So sorry about the controversy. I hope you appreciate the point of view, whether you agree or disagree, and we'll see you next time.